Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a dominant climbing team from a very good battler, Jox, featuring a shadow Pokemon that up until this most recent Rocket event, I did not have access to, and that is Shadow Drifblim. Now the team is a pretty simple one. It's an ABC style flexible team with Pangoro on the lead, Shadow Quagsire as the safe switch, and Shadow Drifblim as the closer, and Drifblim is an absolute star. I believe I went up about 150 elo across the 3 sets that I ran with the team, so I would highly recommend trying this one out. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we're off to an amazing start in game number 1, Pangoro versus a Dunsparce. Opponent is going to safe switch into Goodra, and I will stay in, bait with the Night Slash, and successfully grab the shield. After I successfully grab a shield, I could potentially just send in the Quagsire, as Quagsire can do fine into Goodra, but I decided that I wanted to try and play this out just by winning the 2s with Pangoro, because I have a second counter to the Dunsparce available with my Quagsire. I am going to be shielding up as the opponent will go for the Aqua Tail. My defense is 2 stages debuff, but since I waited to the last second to throw that first close combat, I can make another close combat, pick up the KO, and successfully win switch. They have Diggersby in the back, and now I can bring in Drifblim. Drifblim does great into Diggersby. The quick attacks, of course, are going to be double resisted, and I can hit for super effective damage with Icy Wind. Here, my opponent is going to try for a catch onto the Dunsparce. I can bring in the Shadow Quagsire, and this game is absolutely over. There's just nothing really that the opponent can do at this point. I'm going to overfarm quite significantly with the Quagsire and look to connect with the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to land, and now from here, unfortunately, couldn't quite make the Stone Edge just yet, but this is such a dominant matchup that a Drill Run does not knock out, so I can just withstand Drill Run number 2, make it to the Stone Edge. Stone Edge will basically KO. I switch, they bring in Diggersby, but they're going to immediately be debuffed with Icy Wind. So the Icy Wind is going to land, and their Fire Punches are just not going to do nearly enough damage. The damage output from the Shadow Drifblim is just unbelievably good. I fire off the Icy Wind into the Diggersby, picks up the knockout. I astonish down the Dunsparce and take the win. We move to the next match, Pangoro versus Gastrodon. This is a bit of an uncomfortable lead. However, I'm just going to go for the close combat and dip strategy. Close combat from this thing does a terrifying amount of damage neutrally, so it's a very easy way to grab an early shield advantage, and then you can just bring in Quagsire. I'm not expecting them to bait, so I commit the shield just to get baited, but the good news is I'm able to lure out Dugong. Typically, anytime you see a Mud Slapper, they're going to have some kind of ice type in the back, because almost all the Mud Slappers are just so absurdly weak to the Flyers. Here, I'm able to grab the final shield from the opponent, and now I'm in a pretty nice position. They can go for the Icy Wind, but I'm still going to survive that, make it to a debuff Stone Edge, and this Stone Edge is going to get them deep into the red health. Here, I could have thrown an Aqua Tail, but I decide, you know what, I'm more than happy just to let this go. They're forced to throw energy, and now I can get some nice farm with Pangoro. So Pangoro is going to get the farm down. In the back is Clodsire. I bring in the Drifblim. The opponent must have been running Sludge Bomb on the Clodsire, as they will immediately concede the match. Speaking of Mud Slappers, we got Pangoro versus the Shadow Kanto Marowak in the next match. Shadow Marowak choosing to throw instantly here, wanting to apply the first shielding decision of the match to me, but I'm more than happy to just take the free Karate Chop. Now I'm going to throw 1 and a bait, followed by 1 and a nuke, and if they want to keep this Marowak, they're going to have to double shield. They do decide to double shield. In comes the Quagsire. Quagsire going to get hit with a Bone Club. Opponent will have to switch instantly. If they stay, I can just knock them out with an Aqua Tail. So they're going to switch, and what do you know? It's a Dugong. That's a nice thing about the Open Great League meta for this season. With the amount of changes we've had, it is starting to stabilize a little bit, so you're starting to see some common strategies. So when you see a Mud Slapper lead, you can pretty safely assume ice in the back. This time, I do decide to go for the Aqua Tail because I'm actually not going to bring in Pangoro. I'm just going to go for an energy lead on Drifblim. Drifblim up an Astonish and a Shield is just so deadly. And here, the opponent, I don't know what they're heading back because they quit before they let me see it. We pick up a good lead in the next match, Pangoro versus Morpeko. Opponent safe switches into Clodsire, and the opponent running a team that is very, very weak to ground types. Quagsire absolutely dominates this matchup versus Clodsire. I fire off the Aqua Tail, and I can very comfortably overfarm here and then throw another Aqua Tail to deliver a knockout. Earthquake will do some damage, but with no fast move pressure here, it's just so awkward to beat the Clodsire. So I get to fire off another Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to connect, and my opponent is going to bring in Feraligatr. I'm not going to bait. I'm going to go straight for the Stone Edge because my opponent is ABA weak to Pangoro. They actually let that through. I aggressively switch into the Pangoro, and I'm going to commit the shield as they go for the Hydro Cannon. The Karate Chop did pick up the KO, and now I'm just going to start spamming out Night Slashes. I am down a shield, but the good news for me is that once they throw a move, they're going to be switching to a Dark type, which means their energy is going to be completely walled. So I shield up the first one, and now their only options are going to be a Dark Aura Wheel or a Psychic Fangs, neither of which is going to be doing much damage. So I'm just in a completely one position now. I will fire off another Night Slash. That's going to get them low. They're going to fire off the last second charge attack here. Even if it is the Aura Wheel, that's going to be fine. They're actually running Seed Bomb, so they actually had a move that could potentially knock me out there. But I'm able to take the win, and Drifblim doesn't even have to leave the bench. We see the worst case scenario lead in the next match. This Pangoro Shadow Drifblim core is nearly unbreakable, but Wigglytuff can break that core. Opponent is going to bank energy, bring in Gastrodon, and this is going to be a tough game to win, but the fact that they switch lock to Gastrodon is a massive opportunity for me, especially because they throw. I am now not going to wait my clock at all. I'm bringing in Drifblim right away, and I'm farming all the way down. Because Gastrodon, with this typical moveset of Earth Power and Body Slam, everything's double resisted. It can't do anything to Drifblim. So now, I just get a huge energy advantage, and I'm counting on the fact that Wigglytuff is their only answer to Drifblim. So they bring in the Wigglytuff, I Icy Wind, they end up shielding. Opponent plays to a CMP Tide that they do not win. Drifblim able to grab the final shield. I do, however, want to preserve an ability to use Drifblim later. They're double debuffed, so I'm fine switching in Pangoro. In the back, the opponent has Golurk, and this game will be a win, as I can fire off the Night Slash. It will not KO, but it does so much damage that I'm going to get a Karate Chop farm down, and I get to leave with the close combat. So this is allegedly the Pokemon that core breaks this core, and we still win with a shield intact. Hopping to the next match, this is a terrible lead, Pangoro versus Toxapex. I'm going to bank a close combat before I switch out here. My opponent, them throwing energy tells me they have no good check to Quagsire in the back, because if they did, they would just save the energy. They're going to bring in Guzzlord, and it's as I expected. They don't have a particularly strong check. Stone Edge is going to connect. That does some significant damage. My opponent is going to be firing off their energy. I decide that I want shields down rather than shields up here, so I'm going to shield and then try and either get switch advantage or get the shield back. My opponent is going to shield, and since I did see them throw Brutal Swing, I'm not expecting Dragon Claw, but it turns out they're actually on Brutal Swing Dragon Claw, which is very unfortunate for me, as now I've taken quite a lot of damage. In comes Toxapex, I bring in the Drifblim, and this is the core that this balloon does an amazing job at core breaking, as it's going to be the Diggersby plus Toxapex core. They go for the Fire Punch. I end up shielding the first one. The one thing I'm not 100% sure on is whether it's the right play to shield the Fire Punch or shield the Brine. I know Brine gets same type attack bonus, but it's a terrible move. I'd have to look that up on PvPoke after, because either way, my opponent is going to be able to land a Brine from Toxapex at some point. Here, I will fire off the Icy Wind. Opponent is going to shield, and they're going to be firing off another Fire Punch. I'm going to look to overfarm as much as I can and look to combo here. So I switch into the Pangoro and get the combo play. Close combat is going to knock out. They are not going to get a lot of farm here because I get to another close combat versus the Toxapex. This does do slightly more damage than a Night Slash if I'm not mistaken. And now it's all up to Shadow Drifblim. I make the Shadow Ball. It's a CMP tie. Will this be enough to KO? Shadow Ball barely does not. And unfortunately, we're going to lose this game by the narrowest of margins. So very tough lead, but we get it down to just a couple hit points. Amazing lead in the next match, and amazing switch in for me. A Dunsparce Malamar core, you just have no answer to Pangoro. I go straight close combat. Pangoro can always go straight close combat in the Malamar matchup because you pace identically and you always win CMP. I'm more than happy now to just bring in the Quagsire, tank the move, Mudshot all the way down, because if they try and bring in Dunsparce has a pretty poor matchup here. Dunsparce is never going to be able to farm me down. So they're going to take a ton of damage in the process. They're forced to throw energy here as well. Opponent overfarms as much as they can, but they're still just in a really, really tough position. I get to bring back in Pangoro. In the back is going to be Jumpluff. Jumpluff, a very cool pick. Odds are they're probably running Aerial Ace, as Aerial Ace just allows you an insane amount of spam. But Shadow Drifblim, even though I'm not going to get to land an Icy Wind here, the debuffs are what are just going to be so incredibly impactful. And the Astonish damage. They are half HP. Jumpluff is a very bulky Pokemon, but that's Shadow Astonish. Again, it's a clone of the move Mud Slap. It's an insanely good move. And this thing is just everything that I hoped for, and I'm very happy that I finally have one. They try for the catch. They do not get it. I can just tank this move, Karate Chop all the way down, and win the game. Opponent sees the writing on the wall, and they will concede the match. Pangoro versus Azumarill. This is a terrible lead. I'm going to look to save switch out into the Shadow Quagsire. Opponent responds with a Pokemon that I was not expecting to see. Hello, Dragapult. Okay, well, considering I have a Ghost type in the back, not bad to bait out the Astonish user. Opponent does throw on alignment there, as they do go for the Breaking Swipe. Unfortunately, I just can't get to the next move there. I almost did, entirely because they threw on alignment. That would not have been even close had they thrown on good timing. They go for the Breaking Swipe. That does a ton of damage, and I will be firing off this Night Slash. Azumarill is going to be re-entering the battlefield. I'm going to bring in the Drifblim. In the back is Diggersby, and this should hopefully be a good position, but I'm going to make a crucial mistake. I should have shielded the first Fire Punch. In the moment, I was thinking to myself, I want to save shields for moves from Azumarill, but not shielding the first means that actually did quite a bit of damage. And now I think I'm actually in a position where I can't win because I just don't have enough health available on the Drifblim. Even if I do get a nice combo play and I'm able to knock them out, I'm in trouble here. So I'm able to get them low. Actually didn't have a move, so I can't combo, but I can catch. But I'm just too low on the Drifblim. They can bring in the Azumarill. I close combat right away to try and limit farm. But even if I just go straight Icy Wind, I can't win this game. All I had to do was shield the first move, and I would have been in a winning endgame. But it just goes to show that even in a favorable position, mistakes can still be made. Winnable games can turn into losing games, and this is one of them as I get KO'd with both my shields remaining. Pangoro into Fortress. I think regular Fortress is an amazing meta core breaker right now. Fortunately for me, this team is pretty strong into it. I'm going to farm up a ton of energy and fire off the Close Combat. Close Combat lands. They have a move. I was expecting them to undertap, so I'm just going to click my Night Slash. I win the CMP type by a significant amount, and now I can pressure the first shield of the match. I typically don't like to be the one to make the first shielding decision, so if I'm able to put my opponent in a position where I can make them shield first, to me, that's usually a win. I'm going to overfarm, fire off the Night Slash. I am heavily debuffed, in comes Drifblim, and I end up pivoting it out into the Quagsire. Opponent, they threw an Icy Wind. I don't have to shield this. That was only 5. They need 6 for the first Shadow Ball because Shadow Ball is 55 energy and is 10 energy per Astonish. Here, even though I have a Stone Edge, the correct play is always going to be to go double Aqua Tail. Even if they no-shield both, it's going to do a lot of damage, but the double Aqua Tail covers very nicely for the opponent actually shielding. I have a tough call to make. Here, I decide that Drifblim will be good in the back. They led with Fortress. I'm going to trust in Drifblim. I'm going to farm up. And here, my opponent, unfortunately for them, in trying to catch, makes a game-losing mistake. I was hard reading that Drifblim would be good in the back. Drifblim was useless, but they save their own Drifblim. They throw away the Guzzlord trying for a catch, and now this game that looked a little doomed is going to end up being a win because my Icy Wind KOs theirs due to my energy advantage. Hopping into the final match, we've got a dominant lead. Pangoro into low kicks. Low kicks double resisted on the sucker punches, and this is just a miserable matchup to be low kicks. You can go straight close combat as Pangoro. They're just going to let that through. In comes Azumarill. I lost to the last Azumarill. I am not going to let that happen this time. I immediately switch into the Quagsire, and Azumarill is staying in. This is very fine for me. I get to land the Stone Edge, and this just gets closer and closer into Astonish farm down range for the Shadow Drifblim. They're going to go for an Ice Beam here, and then a switch out into Diggersby. They definitely would have been better off going for the Play Rough there. I guess the Ice Beam was covering for a shield, but I had no desire to ever shield this Quagsire, even without knowing they had a Diggersby in the back. I just was never going to be shielding there. I aggressively switch in Pangoro because I can get a little bit of value out of it just by absorbing a Scorching Sands and just committing to a farm down. When they bring in the Azumarill, you best believe we're going to be hitting it with a couple close combats. So I get to fire off close combat number 1. I did get debuffed, but they're just too low. And Pangoro, if the Azumarill has taken some damage, can actually handle it. So I'm able to get it low, bring in the Shadow Drifblim, opponent sees it, and they will immediately concede the match. So overall, I had an amazing run of sets with this team. This team just performed great for me. And realistically, I think the synergy of Pangoro and Shadow Drifblim is just terrific. Shadow Quagsire, you could probably use a couple different Pokemon as the pivot there. Realistically, you just want something that has a little bit of bulk to it, has some nice coverage against the meta, and is going to be able to have just neutral play in a lot of situations. Obviously, if you save switch a Quagsire and they hit you with a grass type, gonna be a pretty tough game, but outside of that, I mean, that's its only weakness, and that's part of why it is so strong, is it only has that one singular weakness. Well, it's a double weakness, but it only has one weakness overall. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The Sport Guys Fight is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.